The story begins with Alec Ygret calmly fishing at a lake, until a mage named Eldas approaches and asks if he would be interested in learning magic. Soon after, the scene changes, and we see Eldas teaching Alec how to control magical power. To encourage him, the mage mentions that, in the future, he will make friends and might need magic to protect them. Alec surprises his teacher by learning quickly. But even so, he feels frustrated for taking an entire day to master only one spell. Eldas then explains that an ordinary person would take almost a month to learn the same. Excited, Alec asks to learn another spell, but Eldas replies that that's enough for today. The boy feels disappointed by the decision, and the mage invites him to fish until sunset. Alec still wants to keep training, but Eldas tells him that he has a natural talent for magic, and that, even without his lessons, he would one day become a great mage. He also says that the rest should be left to destiny. Alec is startled by those words and asks why Eldas decided to teach him. Before he can answer, the fishing rod moves, and the mage panics, not knowing what to do, since he had never fished before. Alec can't hold back his laughter and helps him, commenting that such a skilled mage should know how to fish. Their lives continue peacefully, and time passes as Eldas teaches more and more about magic to his apprentice. The seasons change, and one day, suddenly, the mage announces that he is leaving the capital. Alec is devastated to hear that, realizing he may never see him again. Before departing, Eldas gives one final piece of advice. If Alec ever has the chance to become a court mage, he must refuse the position. The young man doesn't understand why and asks why his master taught him magic. As he walks away, Eldas reveals that he owed that favor to Alec's late mother. The story then moves forward, showing Alec as a student at a magic academy. There, he discovers that Eldas had been the best in his class and became a court mage right after graduation. However, he also learns that Eldas was later banished, and finally understands the reason behind the advice he was given. Even so, Alec decides to follow a different path. He wants to become a court mage to change the system and somehow repay what Eldas did for him. As the years pass, Alec achieves that goal and earns the title of court mage. However, suddenly, the Crown Prince Regulus expels him from the exploration group right in the middle of a dungeon. Alec, confused, asks the reason, and the prince coldly replies that he's being dismissed for being useless. Regulus explains that he always risks his own life on the front lines to defeat monsters, while Lenny, the fire mage, casts powerful spells to keep enemies away, and Ickis acts as the group's shield, blocking attacks. Alec, on the other hand, according to the prince, just stays in the rear, casting support spells, without the courage to fight for real. He says he doesn't need someone so weak by his side, and even humiliates Alec by saying he doesn't deserve to be called a court mage. Alec tries to justify why he only uses support magic, but Regulus isn't interested in listening. Lenny supports the prince, calling Alec a coward and saying that he always holds the group back out of fear of going deeper into the dungeon. She admits that she only tolerated him until now because the king had ordered them to be on the same team. Now that the prince has decided to expel him, she sees no reason to be polite anymore and says she couldn't stand having someone so useless beside her. Regulus continues, saying that Alec only got good grades at the Magic Institute thanks to others' help, and that's why he was appointed as a court mage. Alec tries once again to explain his reason for using support magic, but the prince interrupts him and asks why he carries a short sword, reminding him that commoners aren't allowed to bear weapons. Alec explains that the sword would be necessary on the next floor of the dungeon, but Regulus becomes furious. He snatches the sword from the boy's hands, grabs him by the collar, and says that no one in his group disobeys his orders. Then he rips the court mage's cape from Alec's shoulders, saying that he doesn't deserve it. Unable to react, Alec leaves the dungeon completely shaken. Even after being humiliated and dismissed, he still wants to help the prince and the group. So, he writes down some notes with information about the dungeon's deeper levels, trying to offer a way to help them. Since Regulus doesn't have enough magical power to handle the dangers alone, Alec always believed that, despite everything, they could become trusted allies. The next day, he goes to the palace to try to deliver the notes to the king, but the guards stop him from entering. They say he has been officially removed from his position as a court mage. Now, Alec is just a commoner, and ordinary people aren't allowed to enter without permission. Shocked, Alec tries to argue, but Lenny appears and tells him to leave, saying that he's now just a commoner like any other. As she turns to return to the palace, Alec asks her at least to deliver the notes to the king, reminding her that it was the king himself who appointed him as a court mage and assigned him to the prince's group. Lenny takes the notes and, coldly, tears each page apart and steps on them. Then she orders the guards to remove Alec from the area, leaving him alone, hopeless, and unemployed in the middle of the city. He feels defeated and murmurs an apology to Elders, regretting not being able to bring change to the court. At that moment, a familiar voice calls his name. Alec turns and sees a red-haired young woman looking at him. She runs up to him and wraps him in a warm hug. Alec immediately recognizes her. It's Yorha. They sit by a river to talk, and Alec tells her everything that happened, how he was expelled from the prince's group and lost his title as a court mage. Yorha shows intense anger toward the Galdana kingdom for maintaining such a rigid division between nobles and commoners. Alec manages, with some difficulty, to calm her down before anyone overhears them. Then Yorha comments that, in fact, being dismissed was a good opportunity, as it fits perfectly with the plans she had in mind. She asks if Alec remembers the promise she made 4 years ago that one day she would bring him into her group. Alec remembers, and Yorha reveals that she came to the capital for that very reason. She stands up, extends her hand, and asks Alec to join her dungeon exploration group. Alec feels a wave of happiness but hesitates, remembering how useless he feels after losing his title as a court mage. Yorha completely ignores those concerns. To her, the one who truly belongs in her group is Alec, and everyone on her team had already agreed that someday they would go looking for him. Alec feels deeply moved by her words and immediately accepts the offer. Yorha warmly welcomes him into the rank, a group called Lasting Period. The next day, Alec departs with Yorha, carrying with him the memory of Eldaz's advice about not becoming a court mage. A few days later, the news of Alec's departure reaches Regulus and his group. They show no interest whatsoever. Regulus comments on how Alec was once considered a genius among the academy's students and how great expectations were placed on him. To the prince, Alec was simply a waste of time. Lenny, meanwhile, remarks that they no longer have to worry, since soon a pure-blood noble, the son of Duke Fornius, will join their group, making them even stronger. She predicts that, before long, they will be clearing dungeons at an impressive pace, and the prince's name will be remembered for those achievements. Meanwhile, Alec and Yorha arrive at Fiesel. Known as the City of Dungeons, Yorha explains that the city is a place where there is no prejudice among adventurers. She and her friends had established their guild's base there, and the dungeon they aim to conquer lies within the ruins to the west of the city. Yorha is eager to register Alec as an adventurer, but when they reach the guild, they receive unpleasant news. The receptionist informs them that Alec cannot join the group because they explore beyond the 30th floor, and for that, a special license is required, one that is only granted to members who have been with the guild for at least 2 years. Yorha becomes furious and tries to convince the receptionist to make an exception, but she fails. Yorha mentions that Kraja was supposed to speak with the guild about this matter, and the receptionist confirms that Kraja had indeed come and even threatened them to allow Alec to join the group, leaving both Alec and Yorha embarrassed. Later, Alec and Yorha sit on a bench, and the young woman looks frustrated for having depended on Kraja's help. While they eat lunch, she comments that their group has already reached the 52nd floor of the dungeon and that they can't afford to wait 2 years for Alec to join officially. Even so, Yorha remains hopeful and decides that if they can't access the higher floors, they'll train Alec on the lower levels instead. Alec agrees with the idea, and they immediately head to a lower-level dungeon infested with insect-type monsters. Yorha uses her reinforcement magic to increase Alec's speed, and he moves around her, defeating the monsters with agility. However, something feels off when the number of insects doesn't decrease. Alec realizes that the problem must be their nest. Something is forcing the monsters to keep attacking. Yorha comments that she didn't expect to face such resistance this early on the 2nd floor. During the battle, she activates her shield and charges toward the monsters. Alec asks her not to do that, insisting that it's better to defeat them one by one. Confident in her defensive magic, Yorha ignores his warning. She remarks that Alec seems rusty, as those monsters shouldn't pose any real challenge. Watching her effort, Alec remembers that he's no longer a court mage, he's just an adventurer again, like in the old days. At that moment, he recalls Eldaz's teachings, to use magic to protect friends in danger. Motivated by that memory, Alec launches into the attack. He swiftly eliminates several monsters with fireballs and defeats the remaining ones using his wand as a physical weapon. A massive swarm of insects surrounds them, but Yorha remains unfazed. She creates a barrier around them both, giving Alec time to cast a powerful lightning spell that instantly annihilates all the insects. With the danger over, Alec breathes a sigh of relief, and Yorha pats his back, praising his performance. However, the ground shakes violently, and a gigantic mudworm emerges, nearly swallowing Yorha. Alec promises to protect her and asks if her defensive magic really was the best at the academy. She confirms, explaining that while she specializes in support, Alec is the best attack mage. Trusting her completely, Alec casts a spell called Sacrifice. A flaming serpent emerges, wrapping around the worm and turning it to ashes. While Yorha remains unharmed, she approaches Alec and comments that, as she suspected, he truly is the best attack mage. The battle brings back memories from their academy days, when they once fought a 5-headed dragon together. Alec's attacks back then were so powerful that he completely destroyed the creature. Thanks to their combined strength, they managed to clear the 68th floor of the dungeon, setting a new record at the academy. Everyone at the academy was talking about how, on graduation day, one group was missing. They had gone to the capital to try to break the dungeon record and still hadn't returned. When Professor Rosa saw them coming back, she let out a sigh of relief. The other students couldn't believe it when they found out that the group had not only surpassed the record on the 37th floor, but had also reached the 68th, defeating even the feared Hydra, the boss of that level. During the ceremony, Rosa handed out the diplomas to the graduates. Ornist ranked 4th among the top students, Kraja 3rd, Yorha 2nd, and 1st place went to Alec. Later, while walking through a park, Alec mentioned that he intended to become a court mage. His father didn't agree with that choice, but Alec wanted to give him a better life. After all, his father had raised him alone since his mother's death. Kraja pointed out that court mages earned a good salary, and Alec, in his thoughts, remembered the promise he had made to Eldaz to change the royal court system. Even so, he confessed that he wanted to become an adventurer and travel with his friends. But he knew being an adventurer was the opposite of having stability. Ornist stated that if Alec joined them, they would become the most powerful group since the founding of the Magic Institute, with 4 prodigies together. Yorha added that from that day on, they would give their all and, once they became famous adventurers, they would come back for him. She asked that if he ever faced any hardship, he should rely on them without hesitation. Back in the present, Yorha took Alec to a tavern to celebrate his arrival. However, after just one drink, she got completely drunk, grumbling about how he had almost roasted her with a fire spell. In the middle of the confusion, she collapsed onto her chair and fell asleep right there. Alec then covered his friend with his cloak so she wouldn't get cold. Suddenly, a man approached, saying Alec would never make it as an adventurer in Fiesel if he kept being that gentle. Alec ignored him, but the man tried to smash a bottle on his head. Alec easily defended himself. The man then revealed that he knew who Alec was and placed an adventurer's license on the table, apologizing for his rudeness. He said Alec could have it if he showed him his magic. At that moment, Yorha woke up and recognized the man. He was the guild master. Alec was shocked. The master led him to the underground arena and explained that the test was simple. All he had to do was make him acknowledge his magic. Yorha disagreed, reminding him that they had just fought monsters, but Alec said it was fine. He still had enough energy and knew that this was the chance he needed to enter the dungeons alongside the group. Seeing his determination, Yorha eventually agreed. The man introduced himself as Levier Stance, the guild master of Fiesel. Alec recognized him immediately. He was a former S-rank adventurer, famous for his strength and leadership. The duel began with Alec launching an electric attack, which Levier easily dodged. The master counterattacked with a splash spell, but Alec evaded it and realized that long-range attacks wouldn't work. Trying to get closer, Alec saw Levier activate his physical enhancement magic, which greatly increased his speed. In a swift movement, the master struck. Alec managed to block, but was thrown against the wall. Getting back on his feet, he began thinking about how to counter such strength. Then a smile appeared on his face. He remembered that he was no longer a court mage and no longer had to hold back. Transforming his wand into an energy sword, he charged forward with everything he had. Levier advanced as well, but was caught off guard by an electric discharge. Alec took advantage of the moment when his opponent was paralyzed to strike with his sword. The combo was perfect, yet still not enough to bring down the master. Excited, Levier activated his magic gauntlets, called Dragoneel. The battle intensified, and even with all of Alec's efforts, his blows had no effect. Worse still, the gauntlet's special ability slowly regenerated Levier's body. Alec tried everything to win, but nothing worked. In a brief lapse of his opponent's guard, he landed a direct hit to the abdomen. But even that wasn't enough. Exhausted and with his mana at its limit, he kept fighting until the very end before finally collapsing during his last attempt. Yorha rushed to help him. When Levier was about to say whether Alec had passed or not, Ornest appeared, commenting that it was impressive to see Alec push a former S-rank adventurer that far. After the duel, Levier acknowledged Alec's strength and talent, declaring that he deserved the adventurer's license. Later, in the guild hall, Ornest asked if Alec had faced many hardships while working at the court. Yorha replied that he had, but that it was a long story. At that moment, Misha rushed in, saying there was an emergency and calling for the guild master. Levier stood up and said he would handle it, asking only that no one touch the shelf of drinks while he was gone. Ornest went straight to the shelf and asked Yorha to tell him everything that had happened with Alec. As he listened, his expression turned to outrage. He was shocked to learn that Alec had worked as a sort of babysitter for the prince, forbidden to wield a sword, forced to carry equipment, organize items, and even prohibited from using flashy spells. Yorha agreed with his anger, saying she had also been furious when she found out, especially since the prince had the audacity to call Alec's support magic useless. Ornest was shocked, remembering that Alec hadn't even used support magic before. Yorha confirmed it, explaining that he had learned everything from scratch and that his defensive magic had become extremely powerful. Hearing that made Ornest even angrier. Alec, who had mastered several types of magic, had to learn an entirely new style just to please the spoiled Prince of Galdana, and even then, he was insulted and expelled under the excuse that he was no longer needed in the group. His rage was so great that he ended up crushing the bottle in his hand, breaking it without realizing it. At that moment, Alec woke up. Yorha, smiling with relief, told him that he had passed Levier's test and earned his adventurer's license. Alec was pleased now he could explore the dungeons together with his old group. However, Ornest interrupted, saying that would have to wait because there was something more important to do: get revenge on the Prince of Galdana's group. Alec asked him to calm down, saying it wasn't worth worrying so much about it. Ornest, still fuming, said that he had to fight back, that it was what common sense demanded. Alec replied that it might be his common sense, but not society's. Yorha reminded them that fights between groups were forbidden precisely because of that kind of thinking. Ornest then asked if she really accepted letting it go after seeing a comrade treated that way. Yorha was left speechless, but before she could respond, Alec stepped in, asking Ornest not to put their leader in trouble. He said he planned to make the most of his new life as an adventurer, and that alone would be enough payback for the prince. Ornest interpreted those words in his own way. He said that all they had to do was become the most powerful group in the world that way. The court would regret dismissing such a talented mage, and if the kingdom ever faced a crisis and came begging for help, they would simply say no. Alec thought the idea of becoming the strongest in the world was far more exciting than going back to serving as the prince's escort. Meanwhile, Levier was discussing a serious problem. He mentioned that when complications involve an S-rank group, the situation becomes a huge challenge for the entire guild. Then he asked Krista what had happened to her group. called Rechroma. The girl replied that they needed help urgently. Levier immediately issued an emergency call, announcing that Krista would need to form a team to rescue her comrades. The location was the 64th floor of the dungeon, known as the Tank Killer floor. Shortly after, Krasha went looking for Alec. She mentioned that a meeting was taking place and wanted to know why he hadn't shown up. Alec explained that only a rank adventurers from Fiesel had been summoned, and he was practically an outsider in the city. Krasha then used a healing spell to treat his wounds and said she didn't care what he had done, she wouldn't meddle, but she was willing to listen if he wanted to talk. Even so, Alec still had trouble relaxing. His time in the court had left him with the habit of always keeping his guard up around people, even knowing that the local adventurers were very different from Galdana's arrogant nobles. Krasha realized how hard those 4 years had been for him. With a gentle look, she approached and placed her hand on his head in a silent gesture of affection. Then Ornest came rushing in, announcing that they had received a rescue mission directly from the guild master. Yorha explained the details. The mission would take place in a dungeon where healing magic was blocked, only potions worked. Alec was surprised to hear that Krasha had agreed to participate in something so dangerous. She replied that, in fact, she had been against it, and that the absurd idea of challenging that dungeon had come from Ornest. Yorha mentioned that, given the characteristics of the floor's boss, it was certain they would have to rely on Alec's power. That's why the final decision about accepting the mission was up to him. Alec, even feeling a bit rusty, said he would accept. Ornest told them to leave as soon as possible, before Levier and the others went ahead without them. 2 groups would take part in the mission, one led by the guild master himself, and the other formed by their team. Krasha pointed out that, in practice, they had only been included as support. Alec believed that the real extra there was him, feeling like he didn't even deserve to be part of the team. But Ornest disagreed, saying that no one but Alec had the right to join their group after all. The most powerful group needed the most powerful mage. Yorha added that the guild master had only authorized their participation because Alec was with them. If it were just the 3 of them, Levier would never have allowed it. And with that, the group lasting period was complete once again. Standing before the entrance of the dungeon, they commented that the challenge they had faced in the capital during their academy days was nothing more than the prologue to the true legend they were about to write together. With confidence in their eyes, they declared that the world would soon know the group known as Lasting Period. They knew that if they tried to descend through the dungeon floors in the traditional way, there would be no hope of rescuing the Rechroma group. That's why Yorha intended to use a core obtained from a defeated boss. With that item, the group would be able to ignore all the intermediate floors and advance directly to the 64th floor. With the core provided by Crystal, they were determined to do everything possible to save the members of the Rechroma group. Since they would depend on Alec to face the boss of that floor, they decided to conserve his magic as much as possible, saving his strength for the most critical moment. Thus, they activated the core and entered the dungeon. As soon as they arrived, they were greeted by a horde of skeletons. Ornest dashed ahead, eliminating every enemy in his path. Alec was surprised to notice that even Ornest had obtained an artifact. Krasha explained that it was Armalsteka, a black spear, extremely durable and sharp, capable of piercing through anything. Despite being a simple artifact, it was perfect for the impulsive Ornest. Alec agreed and asked if he needed any help, but the boy confidently replied that he could handle all those skeletons by himself. Suddenly, Alec felt a presence behind him and reacted instantly, casting a shock spell. However, there was no one there. For a moment, he thought he had been mistaken, but then decided to strike forward, and the attack revealed the form of an invisible creature, the dreaded Grim Reaper. Seeing that, Ornest laughed and commented that he knew Alec was still in top form. Alec dodged an attack and countered, slicing the monster in half. At that moment, he realized that his companions already knew about the invisible enemy and had said nothing on purpose, just to test if he was still prepared for that mission. But there was no time to argue. Another wave of skeletons appeared. Yorha strengthened them with support magic, and everyone re-entered the battle. When they noticed that the creatures seemed endless, Alec ordered a retreat and then unleashed a powerful area lightning spell. Curious, Ornest asked why Alec kept using only lightning magic. Even against the guild master, When he used to command several elements, Alec briefly recalled his past and replied that he used that type of magic because it was the fastest to activate. He tried to change the subject, but Ornest insisted, wanting to know what he was hiding. Before Alec could answer, a tremor echoed from the depths of the floor, followed by a terrifying sound of destruction. It was clear that a boss was there. Yorha quickly cast strengthening spells, and Ornest charged forward at high speed, followed by the others. When they reached the end of the floor, they found a boy desperately fleeing from an earth dragon. The young man screamed for help, visibly panicked. As they watched, Ornest recognized the fugitive. It was Loki Silveria, a support mage known for his cleverness, and also for being the biggest trickster in the Rechroma group. Loki shouted that if he died there, he would haunt Ornest, whispering curses in his ear every night. Running in desperation, Loki tripped and fell, which made Alec worried. But Kraja simply said everything was under control. That was Loki's fighting style. In truth, it was a trap, and the dragon fell right into it. Kraja explained that Loki was an extremely calculating mage. Laughing, Loki mocked the monster for falling into something so obvious, but the dragon retaliated with a powerful spell, forcing Ornest to intervene. Alec and the others tried to fight it, but the creature ignored them, turning back to chase Loki. Trusting his speed, Ornest dashed beneath the dragon and threw Loki toward Kraja, clearing the battlefield to fight alongside the rest of the group. Kraja took Loki to safety, while Yorha asked Ornest to help her hold off the enemy until Alec was ready to deliver the final blow. Ornest engaged in battle but was thrown to the ground. Before the dragon could strike him, Yorha raised a magical barrier to protect him. At that moment, Alec began to cast his spell. Several magic circles started glowing around the monster. Watching that, Loki commented that a mage capable of using 3 spells simultaneously was considered talented, and 5 made one a prodigy. But he was completely stunned to see Alec controlling 20 magic circles at once. Alec then activated the spell, and the dragon was hit by attacks coming from every direction. When Alec was about to increase the intensity, the monster managed to break free, preparing a counterattack. At that instant, Kraja launched a rain of magical arrows at it, and Yorha trapped it with binding magic. Alec took the opportunity and activated his 4 corners seal. Even so, the dragon resisted and struck back. Recalling his teacher's lessons, Alec murmured that he had learned a spell that only 2 people had affinity for, himself and his teacher, the very creator of the spell. As soon as the dragon launched its attack, Alec used reflection magic, sending all the destructive power back at the creature. Even so, the dragon survived, though severely wounded. Then Alec released the power of the seal he had prepared earlier, leaving the monster on the brink of death. To finish it off, Ornest charged forward and, with a precise strike of his spear, pierced the dragon's skull, splitting it in half. Yorha and Kraja ran to the group, celebrating the overwhelming victory. Loki approached, thanking them for the help, and, with a sly smile, mentioned that he already knew Alec, the court mage of Galdana, the same who had defeated the Hydra. Alec calmly replied that he was now just a former court mage. Loki was astonished, thinking it was an incredible waste. Alec said there was nothing to regret, but Loki clarified that he wasn't referring to him, he meant the court of Galdana, calling them fools for letting such a skilled mage go. Changing the subject, Loki asked for some potions, explaining that he had given all of his to the rest of the group, who were still fighting another boss on that floor, an extremely powerful creature. Everyone was shocked, and Yorha asked if the monster they had just defeated wasn't the boss. Loki confirmed it was, but explained that on that floor, there were 2 bosses. With a mischievous smile, Loki took Kraja's hand and explained that his role had been to lure away the less intelligent boss. Annoyed, Ornest threw a potion in his face, asking if that was enough. Yorha just sighed, commenting that the 2 of them always behaved like that whenever they reunited. Kraja told Loki to stop fooling around and share what he knew about the other boss. Loki then explained that the true boss was an undead, a knight wearing completely black armor. The interior of that armor, according to him, might be empty, which meant the enemy's body was the armor itself. Therefore, physical attacks would have no effect unless the goal was merely to buy time. He then handed Alec a magical artifact, a sword called Schwart, a legendary blade capable of splitting the sky and the earth. Ornest found it strange that he would offer something so valuable. But Loki explained that he was doing it because he wanted Alec to fight on the front lines, but without using magic. Kreja, confused, asked if he had lost his mind, since the boss was an undead being without a physical body. With a teasing look, Loki replied that there was nothing to be done, because that was what he loved most: deception, trickery, and lies. He said that immorality and cruelty were his greatest talents. From that point on, the game would be his, and they would move forward with everything they had, ready to strike the enemy in an unexpected and merciless way. Meanwhile, the prince and his group were running to escape from two relatively weak monstrous caterpillars on the 30th floor of the royal dungeon. He couldn't understand the reason behind that absurd situation and asked Lenny to cast a spell. The girl tried, but nothing happened. With no other choice, the prince decided to face them with his sword, but was easily knocked down. As he was carried by his companions, he recalled the time when Alec was still part of the group. Back then, they were strong, and the prince began to believe that Alec had cursed him for expelling him. That was the only explanation for why they were struggling so much against such weak enemies. Later, the prince sought out the mage Vaughn to have himself examined. However, the mage stated that he wasn't under any curse. The prince refused to believe it and kept insisting that Alec had cursed him, saying there was no other explanation for so much difficulty on such a low floor. Vaughn then explained that the 30th floor was a place where magic was nullified and commented that he found it strange that the prince didn't know that, since Alec should have told him. Outraged, the prince asked why he needed to mention that useless man. Vaughn calmly replied that Alec had conquered the 68th floor and had been a member of a legendary group of students. The prince let out a sarcastic laugh, saying that it was nothing more than a rumor created by commoners, and promised that he would make Alec pay for what he had done. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, saying that the king wished to speak with the prince regarding Alec. Upon arriving at the royal hall, the king asked if his son had ever heard of Elda's Mikola. The prince replied that he hadn't and wanted to know who that person was. The king said that Elda's was a noble whom he himself had expelled. That man had said that the current state of the court needed to change, or Galdana would end up facing an irreversible crisis. To the king, at that time, it was nothing but an insolent noble speaking nonsense. Even after being expelled and losing his name and noble title, Elda's entered the Magic Institute as a commoner. There, he silenced everyone with his talent, becoming the best among the graduates and later the royal court mage. He appeared before the king once again, repeating the same words as before, but ended up being dismissed from his position a year later. Despite that, the king admitted that he had often been remembering Eldaz's words and asked if his son understood the true reason he had ordered him to conquer the dungeon. The prince answered that it was to gain experience, but the king corrected him. He said he wanted to confirm if Elda's had been right, if it was truly time to change the kingdom. He then revealed that he intended to reform the promotion system, allowing anyone talented, even a commoner, to reach important positions. The prince was shaken by that, saying that depending on commoners was a disgrace to royalty, something his father himself had taught him. The king agreed that he had raised him that way but said he would now follow Eldaz's advice. The prince tried to make him change his mind, claiming that his current situation was Alec's fault. At that moment, someone entered the hall bringing a torn document, the strategy for the 30th floor, written by Alec during the night. The king looked at the contents and said it was impossible to create something so detailed based on only 1 or 2 visits to the place. It was a meticulous record that made traversing that floor much easier. Feeling unwell, the prince asked to be excused. The king asked Vaughn to look after him. In the corridor, the prince wondered why Alec had never shown him those notes. He began to realize that Alec wasn't the useless person he had thought, and that it was himself who had been incompetent. Determined, he asked Vaughn for a favor. The scene then shifts to the dungeon west of Fiesel. Loki warned that Alec should only use magic when he gave the signal. Yorha asked if he wanted to make it seem like Alec was just a swordsman, and Loki confirmed. Kreja found the strategy interesting but questioned whether it made sense to use psychological tactics against a monster. Loki explained that the creature they would face possessed intelligence and extremely refined sword skills. He said he didn't want to give orders, only that Alec should fight with the sword until the right moment, when they would unleash a powerful spell to defeat the enemy. Alec accepted the plan. Then Loki asked for Kreja's help, saying that finding the boss's chamber was difficult and that they would need to use teleportation magic. Yorha covered his ears as soon as he heard that, and Kreja reminded him that teleportation was a classified spell of the kingdom. Loki, however, said that he had managed to learn it and that everything would be fine as long as no one said anything. He also joked that they were all accomplices now for taking part in using the spell, while Loki drew the magic circle and explained the technique's workings to Kreja. Alec asked Yorha how far they could trust him. Yorha replied that he didn't trust him completely, but believed he deserved a vote of confidence since 2 years earlier Loki had led a high-level raid in the Arcana dungeon and none of his companions had died. Alec was impressed by that feat, knowing how dangerous such a raid could be. Since Yorha had decided to trust him, Alec chose to do the same. He stood up and called Ornest, proposing a bet like they used to make 4 years ago. They would fight with swords, and the loser would face a punishment. Ornest accepted the challenge. Soon after, the group activated the teleportation spell and was taken directly to the floor boss. The members of Rechroma were already exhausted from battle when Ornest appeared, striking the monster, followed by a surprise attack from Alec. Even so, the creature managed to dodge. Alec and Ornest began fighting side by side until Ornest pinned the enemy's cloak to the ground. Taking advantage of the opening, Alec delivered a direct blow to the creature's head. When they thought they had won, the monster rose. It was a Dullahan, an undead knight who appears mounted on a horse. Ornest noted that the monster they had defeated earlier was merely its steed. Suddenly, the Dullahan vanished and reappeared above them, attacking Alec. The boy realized that not only had the enemy become faster, but its strikes had also grown much stronger. Yorha cast a support spell on Ornest, who combined his strikes with Alec's and managed to hurl the monster away. This time, the Dullahan stood up, placed its helmet back on, and let out a deafening roar that struck Alec and his companions. In the blink of an eye, it lunged at Alec. Even though he managed to block the attack, the boy was thrown backward, but Yorha quickly raised a magical barrier, softening the impact against the wall. Alec asks Loki how much longer they need to hold out against that creature. Loki tells them to hang on for at least 5 more minutes. Alec then drinks a potion and switches places with Ornest, allowing his friend to drink one as well. After that, the two return to battle, fighting side by side. During the fight, Ornest comments that after so many years, upon finally meeting Alec again, he was surprised to see his friend with a sad expression, the same one still on his face at that moment. Then, he asks what happened to make him like that. Alec decides to open up and confesses that he only wanted to fulfill a promise, to repay a favor and change the royal court. However, he admits that he failed to do so. Ornest listens and says that even if he wasn't able to change everything, Alec's desire had always been genuine. After all, he endured 4 years in that place where commoners were despised, and that, for Ornest, was already something worthy of respect. His friend's words touch Alec deeply, and he can't hold back his tears. At that moment, Loki finishes the preparations, and a huge magic circle appears in the sky. The Dullahan notices it and, enraged, changes targets, rushing toward Loki. However, the mage had only created an illusion to trick the enemy, luring it exactly where he wanted. The creature steps on a magic trap, and one of its legs is frozen. Even so, it keeps moving forward, but each step triggers another of Loki's traps. Amid the chaos, Ornest accidentally activates one of the traps set up for him, being teleported to the monster's back. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he delivers a precise strike. Loki is impressed to realize that Kreja had improved the teleportation spell so quickly that she was able to adapt it as a combat trap. Meanwhile, Mavel leaps in to deliver a powerful attack. As planned, the Dullahan dodges to the right and ends up activating another of Loki's traps. Furious, the monster climbs the wall toward the mage. Loki tries to draw its attention, but the Dullahan ignores the illusion and goes straight for his real body, hidden by magic. Still, this was already part of the plan. By stepping on another magic circle, the Dullahan creates the perfect condition for Yorha to activate her sealing spell. Even while chained, the monster manages to strike Loki, sending him flying off the wall. As he falls, injured, Loki smiles and says that the rest is now up to Alec, who was already waiting for the right moment to act. And so we end the 4th episode of the anime. The banished court magician aims to become the strongest. If you want to see the continuation of the next episodes, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the upcoming videos. See you next time.